Chapter 57, Family and Friends or Friends are Family. Casterly Rock, 294 AC. Walder helped Jon back to his feet, pulling out the cloth he used to clean his axe and handing it to Jon to stem the flow of blood. Once the worst was over, he noticed Jon's bloodshot eyes and the slight dizziness that seemed to overcome him. Yet, he was grateful that Jon was awake and alert. Seeing him fall had transported Walder back to those woods again. The men had ridden hard, and he felt the arrows hit their marks, though the pain itself was only minor. He looked at Jon, who lay there unconscious. No, not unconscious. Was he warging? Before he could dwell on it, the enemy was upon him. There were 9 of them in total. As he began to swing his axe, he realized there were too many. He would die here, and Jon would die here today. But he was determined to take as many of these bastards with him as he could. His axe caught the first man on the shoulder, almost cleaving him in two. The second lost his head entirely, while the third managed to block his strike. Walder hit him hard with his shoulder, feeling the man fall back to the ground. As the fourth and fifth approached, he noticed 2 moving toward Jon. Rage surged within him as he swung wildly, desperate to protect his king. Suddenly, the sky darkened. He watched as the 2 men nearest Jon were enveloped by a flock of sparrows. A dozen gulls descended upon another man, while yet another fought off a giant eagle. In the chaos, Walder brought his axe down on a man's head, the blade slicing through until it met his neck. Around him, carnage unfolded. More animals joined the fray. He saw a man on horseback being covered by what looked like hares and rabbits. Another horseman was attacked by deer, while a man on foot was impaled by an elk's antlers. The leader turned and began to ride away, but he had barely made it 10 feet. The horse had not yet reached a gallop when a white blur knocked him off, sending him sprawling yards away. The winded man never made it to his feet before Ghost pounced. The wolf didn't grant him the mercy of a quick death. Then it was over. The birds returned to the sky as if they had never been there, while rabbits, hares, deer, and elk melted back into the woods. If it weren't for the bodies scattered around him, you would never have known what had just transpired. A moan broke the silence, coming from a man crawling away, his hands reaching desperately for a bough. Walder's mind fixated on the image of the arrow lodged in Allar's throat. Was this the man responsible? He couldn't be sure, but he knew this man would pay for it, one way or another. How many blows he struck before the man finally succumbed, he couldn't say, but what remained of him was barely human. Walder rushed over to Jon and knelt down, placing his hand on Jon's chest. He felt the reassuring beat of his heart and breathed a sigh of relief. He waited, and soon Loras and Jorah arrived, followed closely by Lord Jaime. They all shared in the relief that Jon was still alive. When Dacey arrived, it was decided that Jon would be taken to Seaguard, and Walder found himself in complete agreement with Jaime. Though he didn't know the phrase, the look on Jaime's face was enough for him. He watched as Loras and Jaime rode off, praying to the old gods for Jon's recovery. Shaking off the memories, Walder accepted the cloth back from Jon and felt a surge of happiness at seeing color returning to Jon's face. Even more surprising was the large smile that graced Jon's lips as he helped him back to his feet. As they walked down the stairs, Walder felt the need to ask what had happened. "You are well?" he inquired. "Aye, Walder, I'm more than well," Jon replied with a nod. What was that?" Walder asked. "Ghost needed me. He needed me to see. The man who killed my brother, who killed Ellaria, he's dead." "The prince killed him?" Walder asked, astonished. "We killed him," Jon said, and seeing the smile on Jon's face, Walder chose not to ask any more questions. They took the lift back down to the family wing, and no sooner had they left it than they were met. Worried gazes filled the room as servants rushed to inform Lord Jaime and Lady Jenna. But the worst moment for Jon came when Margaery and his sister arrived, accompanied by the 2 small wolf pups standing by her side. Jon, what happened?" The blood, are you hurt? Margaery asked, her voice laced with panic. It's nothing, I swear. Just a nosebleed, he replied quickly. As he spoke, Margaery moved to hug him, but she was almost brushed aside by Sansa, who got to him even faster. You promise it's just a nosebleed, right? Nothing more? Sansa asked, wrapping her arms around her brother. Sansa, it's just a nosebleed. I need to change my clothes, and then we can talk, okay? He assured her. She nodded just as Jaime, Jenna, Loras, and Arthur came rushing in. Jon raised his hand to stop them from speaking and leaned in to whisper something in Margaery's ear. She smiled and nodded in response. It's just a nosebleed. I need to change. Perhaps we can talk then, he said, turning to Jaime. All right, Jon, Jaime replied. Daeron, could you and Loras walk with me for a moment? Jon asked, and they followed him down the corridor. A moment later, Margaery took Sansa's hand and led her in the opposite direction, leaving Jon standing there with Jaime and the others. The black pup hesitated before following the gray one. Once he saw that Margaery and Sansa were out of earshot, Jon turned to Jaime. He's well, my lord. It was just a nosebleed. He may have a headache later, but I think he wanted Margaery and Sansa to leave before he told you what happened. It was almost like the woods, my lord, but different, lesser. I'm sure he wants to explain it himself, so I won't say more. Very well, Jaime responded. He, Jenna, and Tyrion turned to head down to Jon's room, with Jon following behind. He stood outside the door while they spoke, leaving it to Jon to explain. It took some time, but eventually, they all left, and Jon was finally alone. Arthur followed Jon and Loras as they searched for Margaery and Sansa. It didn't take long to find them, and when they did, Jon felt a smile spread across his face at the sight of joy with the girls. He and Arthur stood just outside while Jon, Margaery, Sansa, and Loras laughed and joked together inside the room, the two wolf pups playfully rolling around on the floor. Do these episodes of his happen often? Arthur asked. No, Jon replied softly. Only when we were attacked and now. I think he's using more power. More power? Arthur asked, confused. Magic. That's what warging is, a kind of magic. I hadn't heard of it as a real thing, apart from tales I was told as a boy. It's very real, Jon said. And I think when he's older, there'll be no limit to what he can do with it. Arthur listened with interest. As Jon stepped out of the lift, he realized it was the last two people in the world he wanted to see him like this, Margaery and Sansa. If it had been Joy, she would have simply said he had an ouchie and kissed it better. But with Margaery and Sansa, a kiss wouldn't be enough, he thought, catching himself glancing at Margaery's lips. He was touched by her concern and did his best to reassure both her and Sansa. When Jaime and the others arrived, Jon knew he needed to explain everything, which meant Sansa would need to be somewhere else. He leaned in close to Margaery and whispered in her ear, I promise to tell you everything later. I'm unhurt, I swear it, but I need to speak with the others first. Can you stay with Sansa until then for me? When she nodded, he smiled and called for Arthur and Loras to join him. He looked at Walder, who he knew would speak to Jaime, and then they walked down the corridor together. Once they reached his room, Jon paused. I need a moment to share this with Rhaenys alone first. Arthur reluctantly agreed, but Loras was far more understanding and walked with Jon to find Rhaenys. Jon stepped into the room, only to be met with an immediate lecture from his sister. What happened to you? Is that blood? Who did this? Take me to them now. How dare they lay hands on a dragon? Rhaenys exclaimed, her anger palpable. Jon knew her furious chirps could be heard outside the room. I'm unharmed, he replied quickly. It was just a nosebleed. It happens sometimes when I warg. Your chest. Let me see your chest, You have blood on it. Rhaenys insisted, still agitated. Jon pulled off his tunic and shirt, revealing that the blood had merely dripped down from his nose. Rhaenys made him turn around, and if she hadn't been so worried, he might have found it amusing. See? I'm fine, sister. Good. But what do you mean it happens when you warg? If this is the case, I forbid you to warg again, she declared. In a moment of affection, he reached over, picked her up, and sat on the bed with her in his hands, gently stroking her neck while gazing into her deep purple eyes. I have to warg. I had to. Oberyn needed me. He did it, sister. He killed him. He killed the mountain, Jon said, fighting back tears as he met the sadness in her gaze. Oberyn as well? His daughters? She asked, concern replacing some of her anger. They are safe. They'll return soon. Your mother is avenged, Ray. Egg is avenged. It's not enough to bring them back, but the monster who killed them died by our hands, yours, mine, and Oberyn's. Silence fell between them as Jon simply looked at her for a few moments. Then, she curled up against his chest, lying quietly. He put on a clean shirt and walked to the door to let Arthur and Loras in. As he opened the door, Jaime, Jenna, and Tyrion arrived. Jon greeted them with a small smile, trying to convey that he was all right. Once they were all inside, he recounted the events, the way Ghost had reached out to him, and how he had warged into him. Jon recalled the moment he saw Oberyn about to fall, realizing he wouldn't make it. In desperation, he had warged into the mountain. How? Is that even possible? Tyrion asked, his brow furrowed in disbelief. I don't know how, my lord. But I did it. I showed him visions of birds attacking him and a blinding white light. That's when he dropped his sword. I warged back into Ghost just as I saw Oberyn raise his sword. So, you can warg into any of us? Jenna's voice trembled with fear, and it nearly broke Jon's heart to know he was the source of her distress. No, it doesn't work like that. I couldn't control it, he explained, noticing her fear only deepening. No, not like that, my lady. I mean, I saw Oberyn was about to die. I was desperate and reached out, and that's what happened. I can't do it again, I don't think. But you don't know for sure, Jon. Tyrion pressed. No, but I know I wouldn't. He stood up, taking a knife, and walked toward Arthur. I could stab Arthur, my lord, but I wouldn't, would I? No, you wouldn't, Jaime replied, relieved to see Jenna nod in agreement. That's what this is like, I think. There are many things we can and can't do, but we hold back because of who we are. I wouldn't stab Arthur because that's not who I am, and it's not who I ever will be. I wouldn't use this the same way. But. He paused. But? Jenna prompted. If it was anyone in this room, if it was someone I cared for, if their life was in danger, there's nothing I wouldn't do to save them. Nothing. He looked at Jenna, who smiled softly at him. So you're saying that the warging was like that? Oberyn's life was in danger, and you did whatever you needed to save him? Loras asked, and Jon nodded. Were any of his daughters harmed, Jon? Or that knight of his? Jaime inquired. No, my lord. The mountain and his men. Jon closed his eyes, reaching out for Ghost, finding the wolf standing nearby as bodies clad in Lannister colors were placed onto a cart. We lost 5 men, my lord, he said quietly. Wait, did you was that this warging thing? Jenna asked, her eyes wide with amazement. I was in Ghost, Jon replied, watching her reaction. After assuring everyone he was well and promising Jenna he would explain more later, he, Loras, and his Kingsguard set off to find Sansa and Margaery. They discovered the two of them playing with joy in Sansa's room. Jon joined in for a bit, the black wolf pup alternating between leaning against him and rolling around on the floor with her sister. He signaled to Loras to take Sansa and Joy elsewhere while he spoke with Margaery. Together, they walked down to his room, the black pup trailing behind. "Thank you for Sansa," he began. "I want to tell her, but she's not ready yet, Jon." "You're right to wait," Margaery interjected. "Am I? I feel like I'm lying to her, like I was to you." "That was different," she said as they entered his room. She sat on his bed while he settled into the chair, the black pup curling up and falling asleep at his feet. "How?" he asked, concern etching his features. She needs you. You're her brother. Finding out you're not." "I am. I'll always be her brother," he said quickly, interrupting her. "I know that, Jon. But for Sansa, discovering you're not just her brother, that you're her cousin, a hidden prince, a king, and not a bastard," he finished softly. "Don't you ever call yourself that. You're not that, you've never been that." "You're more than that, Jon," she said, annoyance creeping into her voice. "No, I'm not. I'm Jon. Just Jon," he insisted. She smiled at him, then giggled. Just Jon. "So, just Margaery, I promised to tell you everything." He shared everything then, how Oberyn was on his side now, their conversations, Elia's letter and its contents, and how Oberyn had avenged her by killing the mountain. He recounted his role in it all, the warging, the bloody nose, everything. When he finished, Margaery sat silently for a moment before bursting into laughter. "Margaery? Oh, I was just thinking," she said, "when you promise to tell the truth, you really go all out, don't you?" He chuckled in response. I want no secrets between us." "Not us," he replied. She looked at him, her smile fading for a moment before she nodded. "No secrets," she agreed. They then shifted the conversation to other topics. Her family would be leaving in a day or two, and she invited him to their going-away dinner, which he gladly accepted. When he mentioned that he was heading to Lannisport, she offered to accompany him, and he felt a strong temptation to say yes. "I'd really like you to, but I need to do this myself," he explained. "I need to speak to Ellaria, let her know Oberyn as well, and just talk to her." "I understand," she said. "How about we all go on a picnic? You, me, your ladies, Sansa, Loras, Joy, and Brienne. We can pick a nice day and go near the river." "I know a great spot," he suggested. Her face lit up with the brightest smile he had ever seen. "I'd love that." Let's do it," she exclaimed. He stood up, waking the black pup, whose yawn and stretch made them both laugh. He checked on Rhaenys, and then he, Margaery, and the black pup left the room, with Walder and Arthur trailing behind. He walked her to where Sansa and Loras were speaking with Joy, who ran over as soon as she saw them. They chatted for a bit before he and Loras said their goodbyes and headed to the lift. As they walked, he turned to Arthur. "I need to go to Lannisport to speak to Ellaria, as well as our friends," he said, and Arthur nodded in understanding. They took the lift down, and Walder and Loras went to fetch the horses. Although he wasn't supposed to ride, he found he didn't care. He could manage with just his good arm, and with Winter, he only needed to hold on anyway. Arthur looked at him curiously, clearly wanting to speak, but before they could, Loras and Walder arrived with the horses. With Walder still needing to find a horse, he decided to stay back while the others rode ahead. Lannisport. He helped her onto Winter before they departed. Lyness remembered the wedding. It had been even more extravagant than her own in Old Town, and she had enjoyed it immensely. Seeing Daisy in her wedding dress and witnessing how happy Jaime made her filled Lyness with joy. She was glad she'd fought Yora about attending. With the baby still so young, she had considered not going, but the Pinnacle ship had waited offshore for them, making the journey much easier. Wendell had even done them the favor of coming to Bear Island instead of taking his own ship and heading the other way. Yora had been even more reluctant than she was. While he never demanded they stay behind, he had strongly suggested it. But Lyness wanted to see her friend married, and in the end, Yora wouldn't deny her that wish. He also wanted to speak with Jon and Jaime, although he would have waited if she had asked him to. Finding out the truth about Jon hadn't been as shocking as it should have been. A part of her had always known there was something different about the boy, something special. Discovering who he really was only confirmed it. Ultimately, it didn't matter. Jon had won their loyalty and support long before they knew the truth about him. Pledging allegiance to him wasn't just the right choice, it was the only choice. Still, when Meej returned after the wedding, carrying both the pride of a mother and the weight of the truth, they sensed something was amiss. 3 moons ago, they stood on the small docks, watching the longboat as it pulled in. Meej stood at the front, almost daring anyone to try to take it from her. The construction on the pier and dock had begun, but the new keep was little more than a few small wooden structures at that point. When Meej and the girls disembarked, they rode back, Lyness in the covered cart while the others rode their own horses. Once they reached the keep, Meej asked her how she was doing. With the berth just around the corner, Lyness felt tired, but everything was well according to the maester. Yora fussed more than ever, ensuring she was comfortable and constantly asking if she needed anything. Yora is both a gift from the gods and incredibly annoying at the same time, Lyness said with a laugh. Love makes us all act foolishly, Lyness, men most of all, Meej replied with a nod. They enjoyed their dinner, and later that night, as they settled into bed, Yora turned to her and asked, "Have you noticed anything off with my aunt?" "Yes, she has been acting somewhat strangely," Lyness agreed, and Yora nodded in understanding. The next morning, as they broke their fast, Meej said, "We need to talk about Jon Snow, Yora." "We do?" Yora replied, surprised. We do." "You too, Lyness," Meej added, her expression serious. "Jon Snow is not Ned Stark's son." Lyness looked at Meej in shock, but Yora seemed unfazed. "He's hers, isn't he?" Yora said with a soft smile. "Hers?" Lyness echoed, confused. "He's Lyanna's boy, her and the prince's," Meej explained, a broad smile spreading across her face. "Oh, the poor boy," Lyness said, recalling the story she had heard. "It was never rape, Lyness. She would have gutted any man who tried. No, they loved each other. He married her in front of the old gods and the new." "What about Elia?" Lyness asked. "I know not the truth of it, only that she gave her consent," Meej replied. "Is he going for the throne?" Yora asked, his brow furrowing. He is. And this Mormont is with him, as is his uncle and Wyman. I will not abandon Lyanna's boy, Yora. So, what say you?" Meej looked at her bear, who met her gaze and nodded. "Bear Island stands with Lyanna's son," he declared, and Meej nodded proudly, as did Lyness. A night later, Gerald arrived, screaming and bellowing his way into the world, a true bear if ever there was one. Yora had been worried, nearly needing to be restrained at the sound of her screams during the birth. But when he saw that both mother and son were healthy and well, Lyness had never seen him so happy. It was the wedding day, and naming the boy had turned into quite the task. Lyness wanted to honor both Yora's family and her own, while also paying tribute to the child who would ensure her son had the future he deserved. In the end, they chose to honor the man who had given his life to protect the future king. Her granduncle Gerald had died as he had lived, serving as a kingsguard and protecting a king, and this one was worthier than the last. She chuckled at the belch her son let out after finally getting his fill. He had a hearty appetite, and even though she had a wet nurse, she nursed him herself whenever she could. Dressed and ready to take him for a walk, she was about to step outside when a knock on the door interrupted her. "Give me a moment," she called out, hastily tucking herself back into her dress and covering up before heading to the door. Lady Lyness, we came to visit the babe, if that's all right? Margaery said with a warm smile as she entered the room along with Sansa and Joy. Lyness noticed each of them carrying small boxes and sighed at the thought of presents. While she appreciated their kindness, Gerald was far too young for gifts, and the girls should be spending their coins elsewhere. Nevertheless, she greeted them with a smile and accepted the boxes. Margaery had brought a small silver rattle filled with colorful beads. Lyness shook it, eliciting a laugh from Gerald. Joy surprised her with a wooden teething ring shaped like a bear, and Lyness looked at her in wonder, impressed by her thoughtful choice. This is beautiful, Margaery. Thank you. And thank you too, Joy, she said, holding up the teething ring. Sansa had crafted a lovely cover for Gerald. It wasn't quite a blanket or a shawl, but the intricate designs were as beautiful as those on her handkerchief. Lyness placed it over Gerald, who immediately grabbed it and threw up a little, causing Sansa to look on in horror. He loves it, Sansa. He's just like a little prince, Lyness reassured her, laughing at the unexpected turn of events. He's like a bear, marking his territory, she said, noticing the girl's smile. He smells funny, Joy remarked, leaning in, thinking the baby had soiled himself, only to discover he hadn't. That's just how babies smell, Joy, she replied, unsure if the girl was being rude. It's nice. I wish I smelled like that, Joy said a moment later, causing her to laugh. You smell nice too, Joy, she said, earning a big smile from the girl. She watched as the girls cooed over her son, visions of the future flashing through her mind. Thankfully, that future was still a long way off, and she had many years ahead to enjoy watching her boy grow up. An hour later, Daisy arrived, and the girls left her and Daisy to catch up, even offering to take Gerald from her, though she politely refused. By the time Yora arrived, she noticed that most of the day had passed without her leaving her room. In fact, she had no intention of doing so, sending him to fetch their meals instead. That night, as she lay in bed with Yora asleep beside her and Gerald in the makeshift crib, she reflected on the invitation to the tournament in Lannisport 5 years earlier and the girl she had been back then. She had come seeking adventure, hoping a knight would wear her favor and indulging in harmless flirtation. Now, here she was again, and that silly little girl seemed like a distant memory, one she realized she didn't miss at all. In Lannisport, 294 AC, Ellaria struggled to find sleep whenever Oberyn wasn't sharing her bed. Though those days apart were rare, the separation still left her feeling raw. Her desires for pleasure faded when he was gone, leaving her bed empty until his return. Sarella kept her company as best she could, but their interests were so different. When they weren't talking about Oberyn and her sisters, the conversation often fell flat. To make matters worse, Sarella worried just as much as she did. Each day without news intensified their fear, but Oberyn always came back, he always found a way. Many years earlier, they had been traveling through Essos when her love grew bored. Oberyn was feeling bored, and there wasn't much he wouldn't do to relieve that boredom. They were in Meereen when he decided to participate in the fights at the fighting pits. At first, she had laughed, thinking they were just friendly spars. But when she learned that these battles were to the death, her amusement turned to worry. As usual, he brushed off her concerns with a laugh. Oberyn's confidence, his unwavering belief in himself, was as enticing to her as his looks. That night, they made love fiercely, and the next day, she found herself watching him prepare for his fight. He swallowed some wine, picked up his spear, and twirled it expertly. Then, her heart sank as she saw his opponent enter the arena. The creature, he was clearly no man, towered at nearly 8 feet tall, his body firmly muscled, and the axe he wielded was almost as large as he was. "You're going to fight that?" she asked, anxiety creeping into her voice. "I'm going to kill that," he replied with a smile. She smiled at the memory, recalling how he spun through the air, moving like a shadow on the sand, always just out of reach but ever present. He toyed with the giant, wearing him down, and in the end, he took him down as easily as if he were a dwarf rather than a giant. That thought brought her comfort as she dressed. No matter the size of the man he faced, he was Oberyn Martell, and her love would prove stronger. She was breaking her fast alone when Sarella walked in, carrying a book she had brought from Dorne. "Good morning, daughter," she greeted. "Morning, Mama," Sarella replied, a smile brightening her face. It had taken some time for the girls to start calling her that, but now all of them, even Obara, did. She didn't want to replace their mothers, though all but NYMs were long gone. She wanted them to know she was there for them, that they could come to her, and she would treat them as she would her own daughters. They were Oberyn's daughters, making them hers too. After finishing their meal, they lounged around the house for a bit before heading out to explore some of the stalls and the merchants of the town. Ellaria found the wares unappealing, but Sarella discovered a book about kings that she decided to buy. Afterward, they enjoyed lunch in a tavern before returning to their residence. As they approached the gate, Ellaria noticed Jon Snow waiting, accompanied by a guard who appeared to be Dornish and the young Tyrell boy. For a fleeting moment, her heart skipped a beat, and she struggled to catch her breath. But when the boy turned, looked at her, and smiled, she relaxed, relieved that he wasn't there to deliver bad news. Together with Sarella, she walked over to him. He was a handsome young lad, a fact that made sense given the truth of his heritage. Ellaria had never known Lyanna Stark, but Oberyn had often remarked on her beauty, especially when he wasn't lamenting her role in his sister's death. As for Rhaegar, everyone knew of the Silver Prince, and seeing their son before her, it was clear the boy had inherited his looks, aside from his coloring. "Lady Ellaria, Lady Sarella," Jon greeted them. "Jon Snow, I'm glad to finally meet you." "Oberyn has sung your praises," Ellaria replied, noticing Sarella's curious glance. "I'm sure Prince Oberyn exaggerated, my lady," Jon said humbly, and she nodded in acknowledgement. "May I present Lord Loras Tyrell and my guard, Ser Dayron Sand," he continued, gesturing to the guard. "Lord Loras, a pleasure," Ellaria said as he kissed her hand. "Ser Dayron, it's good to meet one of my brothers so far from home," she added. "My lady," the guard replied with a nod, and she thought him handsome, though the dye in his hair didn't do him any favors. "My lady, I was wondering if I could speak to you alone," Jon said, glancing at Sarella. "Perhaps Loras can show you some of the lesser-known book merchants. I'm sure there's something interesting to find." "I'd like that very much." "I haven't found much so far," Sarella said eagerly. Ellaria walked into the house with Jon and the guard while Sarella, along with her guards and Loras, headed back into the town, taking a different direction. Once inside the sitting room, Ellaria ordered tea and watched as Jon's guard took his position by the door. She sent her own guards outside and, when the tea arrived, she poured them both a cup. "My lady, I came to tell you that Prince Oberyn was successful and is currently on his way back here," Jon said. Ellaria felt a surge of joy and almost jumped up to hug him. "He is unharmed?" "He and the girls?" she asked eagerly. "They are, my lady," Jon replied. "And Ser Demon?" she pressed. "Aye, my lady. The mountain has fallen, and Elia and Aegon have been avenged," he said, a soft smile gracing his face. "Did they send you a raven?" she inquired. "No, my lady. It's complicated." "I'm a warg," he admitted, watching her confused expression. "A warg?" she echoed. "I can see through an animal's eyes and control them too," he explained sheepishly, noticing her astonishment. Then, with his eyes closed, he concentrated. Moments later, a small bird flew in through the window. It landed on Jon's shoulder, chirping as it looked at Ellaria. Jon extended his hand, and the bird hopped down his arm, settling comfortably in his palm before taking off again. As it flew away, Jon opened his eyes, and Ellaria stared at him, a mix of shock and surprise washing over her before she burst into laughter. "That's quite a useful little trick you have, Jon." "Aye, it is. My wolf," ghost, is with Prince Oberyn, so I've seen it through his eyes. I assure you, my lady, they are well. How far away are they? She asked. A week, I'd say, unless they travel quickly. But I'd expect them within a week. He likes you, you know. Ellaria remarked. I'm glad to hear it, my lady. We share some blood, Jon said softly. You share more than that. He told me you're his nephew, that his sister demanded it of him. Elia was too good for this world. On that, Oberyn and I agree, he replied. As do I. If you are Oberyn's family, Jon, then you are mine too. My lady, Ellaria, my name is Ellaria, and you can call me aunt, nephew. The boy did his best to hold back his tears. She considered hugging him but decided it was best to let him be for now. They talked about her daughters, and she was pleased to see his genuine interest. When he spoke of his sisters and friends, she understood why Oberyn had taken to him. He cared deeply for his family and friends. Just like Oberyn, there was nothing he wouldn't do for them. Oberyn had recognized that in him. The boy is her son. He may not share her blood, Ellaria, but he has her heart, she thought. He then asked about the girls, wondering if they knew the truth and if he should tell them. When she mentioned Oberyn, he inquired about Sarella and her desire to learn more, frustrated by the maester's reluctance to allow women access to knowledge. They hold on to it as if it's more precious than gold, he said, annoyance evident in his voice. I was wondering, when she knows the truth about me and Rhaenys, do you think she'd want to stay here? To learn more and see a dragon grow? His question surprised her. I think she would. I think she would want that more than anything. Do you wish for her to stay? My sister needs company, someone who could help her, someone smart and clever. In time, Sarella may come to understand her chirps. I can help, and perhaps they could even speak together. She smiled at his enthusiasm. You may never get Sarella to leave again if she learns to speak dragon, she joked, making him laugh. Lord Tyrion has an extensive library too. I'm sure she'd find books she never imagined existed. Also, there are things I don't know, things I sense. Having someone eager to discover would help me too. When Oberyn returns, we shall speak more about this, she said. He stood up and nodded to her, preparing to say his goodbyes. Farewells were never simple for her, and Ellaria couldn't let him leave with just a nod. She wrapped her arms around him, holding him tight, feeling him embrace her in return. After he departed, Sarella arrived, carrying a half-dozen books and wearing an excited expression. Yes, she would speak to Oberyn when he returned. Having his daughter spend time with his niece and nephew would surely please him. Jon had waited outside until Loras came back. After saying goodbye to Sarella, he allowed Arthur to lead them to the tavern where the Velaryons and Lord Darry were staying. Arthur had already spoken to both of them, and Lord Raymond was more than pleased to hear from him. Unfortunately, the tavern was not Tyrion's, so once Jon met them, he asked them to gather there within the hour. Sorry you had to spend time with Sarella, Loras. I needed to speak to Ellaria alone, Jon said as they settled into the room. It was no problem, Jon. She's a smart girl, and we had fun together, Loras replied. Good. She may be staying with us when they leave. She may? Arthur asked, intrigued. I need help with Rhaenys, someone who can stay with her, someone I can trust. Is there a problem with her? Loras inquired. No, but I feel like I'm being pulled in a million directions. It's as if I don't have enough time for everyone. I don't want her to miss out on being with family just because I'm too busy for her. You know we're all here for you, right? Loras reassured him. I know. I have no problem with it, it's just about finding a balance. Even then, I want someone with her when I'm not, Jon said, smiling at Loras. The Velaryons arrived first, followed by Lord Raymond. Jon had Loras stay in the room while he spoke to them. "My lords, it's an honor to speak to you without pretense," Jon said with a smile. "You too, your grace," Montfort replied. "Please, my lord, call me Jon." "We can save the titles for when I'm wearing a crown," he said, and both Montfort and Oberyn nodded in agreement. "Lord Raymond, have you and Arthur spoken?" "We have, Jon. I wanted to thank you, my lord, for everything your family has done for mine. Your brothers, Ser Willem, Ser Jonathan, there's a saying in the North remembers. I may be a dragon, but I'm a wolf too, and there's northern blood in my veins. I promise you, my lord, I remember and shall always remember what your family has lost. When I'm crowned, I intend to repay some of the debt I owe you, both of you," he said, glancing at the Velaryons. "There's no need for that, Jon. Our families have stood together since before Aegon the Conqueror. We stand with you now and always," Montfort said. As do I, my king," Lord Raymond added. "Still, my lords, I intend to make good on it. To that end, I'll be speaking to Lord Jaime about how best to involve you in our trading deals. We'll need to operate under the radar, so I can't assist with ships just yet," Jon explained, looking at the Velaryons. "But I believe we can find a way to help you grow stronger while we prepare. We need to be careful, Jon. The Stag and Falcon will take notice if we suddenly start doing business with Lord Jaime," Raymond warned. "I think we can use ASOIAF trading to cover that, my lords. We can almost arrange it so that you're responsible for part of it, make it seem like it's your own contacts in Essos, and that we're just acting as transport," Jon suggested. Montfort exchanged glances with Oberyn and then Raymond, a smile spreading across his face. "I think that could work. We could also divert the funds to make it look like we're just making a bit of coin, nothing that would attract the Stag's attention." "What about the other families, Jon? Celtigar, Sunglass, Bar Emmon, and those in the Riverlands?" Oberyn asked. "In time, my lord, we'll reach out to others. For now, we'll keep it to those we've already spoken to. Ser Richard will be in touch and will decide if it's the right time," Jon replied, nodding at Oberyn. Jon watched as the conversation continued to unfold. Raymond, followed by Montfort and Oberyn, knelt before Jon, each pledging their loyalty. Jon bid them to rise, and he noticed Arthur and Loras watching with smiles. He requested a moment alone with Raymond, wanting to discuss his brothers. They shared laughter over tales of Ser Willem and Ser Jonathan. Afterward, he turned to Montfort and Oberyn, speaking of Valina, Demon, Corlys the Sea Snake, and Lena. He reminisced about Alyssa, the mother of his namesake, and Corlys, the First Lord Commander of the King's Guard. They exchanged stories and jests, with Montfort sharing memories of his grandmother. As they prepared to leave, Jon looked at them, searching for the right words. "My lords, our families are intertwined. Few share a history like ours. I want you both to know that I respect that history. I am honored and humbled by it. Your family has endured more than most due to your support of mine. I cannot promise it won't suffer for a while longer, but I swear to you, here and now, on fire and blood, that when I am king, House Velaryon shall not be forgotten." He saw the sincerity in their eyes, the weight of his words resonating. Lord Montfort bowed, while Oberyn simply smiled. As they departed, Jon felt he had made his family proud. He would ensure the truth of his promise once he wore a crown, but until then, he would do everything he could to help their house rise again. On the ride back to Casterly Rock, he felt lighter, as if he had begun to exorcise some ghosts of the past. Loras put winter away for him, and his mare seemed grateful to have him back. Jon promised her he would take her out riding properly soon, and she nuzzled against him in appreciation. After taking the lift to the family wing, he walked to his room and spent some time with Rhaenys, sharing his plans with her. Sarella seemed excited at the idea. He walked over to the chest where he kept his father's letters. He still hadn't found the time to sort the personal ones from the lesser correspondence, but today had driven the point home: he might never get the chance to do everything he needed to. Some tasks would require help. All he could do was try not to miss out on the important ones. With that in mind, he grabbed the letters and made his way down to Tyrion's rooms, finding him, unsurprisingly, engrossed in a book. "My lord, I have these for you to read when you have the time," he said, handing over the letters. "Are you sure?" "I thought you wanted to go through them, Jon," Tyrion replied. "I did, my lord, but I trust you to handle it," Jon said, and Tyrion smiled at him. "I will. I've already uncovered some things, but I'll read these as well, and then we can discuss them." "Is there anything I need to know?" Jon asked. "Don't worry about it for now." "Go on, it must be time for dinner," Tyrion said, and Jon nodded. "You're not coming, my lord?" "No, I have reading to do," Tyrion replied, and Jon couldn't help but laugh at the excited look on his face. Meanwhile, Olenna had faced her own challenges. Explaining to Mace why they would be staying on had been difficult enough, but trying to clarify why they would be cutting off funding to the crown was a frustrating exercise that she didn't have time for at her age. In the end, she told him she had plans for the coin and would handle matters with the crown herself. When he brought up the marriage between Margaery and Tommen, which wouldn't be announced until the boy came of age, she resisted the urge to smirk. The marriage she had agreed to was far more advantageous, and the secrecy surrounding this one made perfect sense. She even found herself agreeing with Jenna's suggestion that Margaery and Jon not be informed of their agreement. Once again, the reasoning seemed sound, which was more than could be said for Mace's arguments. "Oh, do please shut up, Mace," she finally said, having had enough. "Mother," he exclaimed, shocked. "If they intended to give us a wedding?" "They promised us a wedding, Mace. Instead, they intend to string us along and spend our coin." "But Lord Arryn is a duplicitous fool." "Leave this to me, Mace. I'll handle the crown. Now, I actually have a job for you when you return to Highgarden." She noticed the smile spreading across his face at the prospect of a task. "Of course, Mother. I want you to start speaking with Lord Stark. Since his daughter will be staying with us, we should offer him a better deal on the crops we provide. Perhaps we can allow them to buy more." "I shall see to it at once, Mother." "Remember, Mace, a friendly price," she reminded him, and he nodded, pleased. Once he was gone, Olenna made her way to Allary's room. She knocked on the door and waited until Allary answered before stepping inside. "Olenna?" Allary inquired. "I wanted to discuss Margaery, Allary." "Margaery and Jon Snow. They're just children, Olenna. He's a good lad, very respectful. I don't see the harm in them being friends." "Nor do I, Allary. In fact, I think we should encourage their friendship." "Allary?" she asked, sensing the suspicion. "Allary, there are things I can't tell you yet, but you've seen them together. Forget his birth for a moment. Do you think they'd make a good match?" Allary studied her silently for a moment before nodding. Olenna smiled back at her. "Good. I think so too. So, while we won't push them together, we won't discourage them either. Agreed?" "Agreed," Allary replied, and Olenna walked back to her own rooms. She planned to speak with Lyness and Yora the following day, organizing the prices for their deals herself. With the discounts she would offer and the ones Mace would negotiate with the Starks, the North would soon grow stronger. They would make up for the coin in other ways, starting with not paying the crown. She sat down and began to write the letter she would send to King's Landing, almost giddy at the thought. Once she was finished with her thoughts, Olenna prepared herself for dinner and made her way to the small dining room. Garland and his betrothed were already seated. Although she had little patience for the Apple Lords, she found herself approving of the young lady, especially since she made her grandson happy, an added bonus. When Loras and Margaery arrived, they were speaking animatedly, and Olenna had no doubt about the topic of their conversation. Her Rose was so wrapped up in the dragon's embrace that she seemed oblivious to everything else. Thankfully, the boy felt the same way, and Olenna smiled at the thought of the truth being revealed and the future they would build together. However, she couldn't help but glare at Loras. He had hidden the truth from her, and while she respected his reasons, he still deserved a reprimand for it. Another time, another place, she thought as she sat down. When Mace and Ellaria arrived, dinner began, and she found her appetite to be ravenous, just as it had been for the past few days. Her initial annoyance at being left out soon transformed into excitement about what the truth would mean for her family. "Grandmother, is something wrong?" Margaery asked. "No, sweetling. How was your day?" "It was fun, grandmother. I spent some time with Lyness and the babe, and John invited Sansa, Joy, Eleanor, Mega, and me to a picnic," Margaery said, smiling. "A picnic?" Olenna replied. "Aye, there's a nice spot by the river where we've gone before," Loras added. "It's perfectly safe, grandmother," he quickly added, noticing her scowl. "Very well. If that's what you'd like to do, then by all means, go," Olenna said, and Margaery nodded happily. Later, Olenna cornered Loras at the end of dinner and brought him back to her room, leaving him to stew in silence for a few moments. "Your reasons?" she asked, staring intently at his face. "He is my king, I swore an oath." "Above your family?" "In this, yes. I will not betray his confidence, grandmother, not even for you," Loras said, and she resisted the urge to smirk. "So you'll keep his secrets? Will you shield his back? Too?" "If needed," he said determinedly. "Silly boy, go." "I'll speak to you later," she replied dismissively, waiting until he reached the door. "Loras, I'm very proud of you." On another day, she would have slapped the stupid grin off his face, the one that made him look too much like Mace. Ser Richard could see Ashmark ahead and felt relieved. He had ridden hard, and while he enjoyed sleeping outdoors, he missed the comfort of a warm room and a soft bed. Carrying the Lannister seal ensured he was treated much better than an ordinary traveler. He received superior rooms, food, and drink simply because of it. As he approached the gates, he was surprised to find the guards in a celebratory mood. He offered his greetings and was soon led into the castle. Lord Daemon greeted him shortly after his arrival and had him shown to a lovely set of rooms, where a warm bath awaited him. He enjoyed it immensely, dressed again, and made his way to the hall for his meal, once more finding the atmosphere filled with celebration. As he reached for an empty seat, he was surprised to see Lord Daemon eager for his company. He accepted the seat offered and the Lord began to speak. "What brings you to Ashmark, Ser?" "Ser Miles, my lord." Miles Dalt. "You're a long way from Dorne, Ser Miles." "I'm a hedge knight, Ser." "I'm a long way from anywhere," he replied, and Daemon laughed. "You come from Attorney?" "I did, but I fell far too fast," he said, and Daemon regarded him thoughtfully. "You must have seen my son there, Adam." "Ser Adam didn't compete, my lord." "No, he was on more important business," Daemon said, and Richard heard chuckles around him. "If I may ask, my lord, has something happened?" Everyone seems in a jovial mood. "Nothing wrong with joviality, Ser." "Indeed, my lord," Richard said with a smile. "But you're not wrong. The mountain has fallen. Gregor Clegane is dead." Richard had to hold back a shout of joy at the news. "He was brave enough to face that monster," Richard said, his voice filled with admiration. "My boy played his part, but there were others too," Lord Daemon replied, moving closer. "I heard the Red Viper was involved somehow," he whispered. "The prince, is he well?" Richard asked, adding an extra layer of concern, as was fitting for a Dornishman. "Yes, Ser. Your prince lives," Daemon assured him. "Now, come. We both have something to drink to, so join us." The hangover Richard woke up with the next morning was more than worth it. After washing and dressing, he broke his fast, then expressed his thanks and goodbyes to Lord Damon. 2 days later, he passed the Golden Tooth, and another 2 days brought him into the Riverlands. It would take him 3 more days to reach Raventree Hall. Lord Tytos was a tricky man to deal with, but if anyone knew about bandits in the Riverlands, it would be him. It was time for Richard to step out of the shadows once more.